Glory be to God who gives us the word. May God write that word on our hearts. And may God and God alone receive glory, honor, and praise. There is an old joke that gets told around these parts. It goes something like, don't like the weather in Evansville? Wait 5 minutes. Yes, we do have some rather erratic weather patterns in these parts. But the heart of that old gag is equally true. If you don't like something, just wait a minute. It will change. One of the lessons that I've learned in my readings in Buddhism, as I try to put Buddhism and Christianity into conversation, is that they have this wonderful tradition that they call impermanence. It's as close a teaching to a doctrine in Buddhism as you are likely to find. The lesson of impermanence basically says that everything is changing and changing at every moment. The lesson of impermanence teaches that nothing stays the same, ever. Everything is in flux. Everything is constantly shifting. Everything is constantly in motion, and nothing ever stands still. The Buddha taught the lesson this way. Like a shooting star, a mirage, a flame, a magic trick or dewdrop, a water bubble, like a dream, lightning, or a cloud. Consider all things thus. Everything we know, the Buddha taught, everything we think we know, is illusory, due to the simple truth that everything is constantly changing. I share that teaching with you that's at the very heart of these two major lessons for the morning. The first lesson is the story of Hannah, the mother of Samuel, and her desire to have a child through a very long period of infertility. The second lesson is a teaching from Jesus about the nature of impermanence and the reality of change. So, bringing all three of those strands together, let's look closer. Hannah's story begins with the simple reality that many face in our world today. Hannah wanted to have a baby and couldn't. According to the statistics collected by the Centers for Disease Control, 6.1 million women between the ages of 15 and 44 have an impaired ability to have children, and 2.1 million married couples experience infertility. But Hannah's problem had an additional aspect. Hannah's husband, Elkanah, had two wives, Peninnah and Hannah. Peninnah, it seemed, had no problem conceiving and bearing children. Hannah, it seemed, was never to have a child. Elkanah gave special treatment to Hannah and lavished special attention on her. Peninnah gave her nothing but grief. Hannah feels awful, diminished, cursed. And what does her husband say? It's okay, honey. Don't cry. Don't be sad. After all, I'm worth more than 10 sons. Leave it to a man to make it all about him. Hannah went to the holy place and was in the presence of the Lord. She was deep in prayer, and while in prayer, made God a promise. If God would grant Hannah a son, she would dedicate that son to God's service. And not just any service, but she would raise him as a Nazarite, a very dedicated and strict lifestyle that called for abstinence from strong drink and did not allow its adherents to cut their hair. Hannah offers God a quid pro quo. Do this for me, and I'll do this for you. Eli, the priest, was standing nearby, sees Hannah's lips moving, but hears no words. So like the other enlightened man in this story, Eli opens his mouth and says something stupid. How dare you come here drunk, the priest says to the woman. Hannah explains her situation. her pain, the nature of her prayers. Then Eli offers her a blessing, a confirmation of her prayer. Go in peace. The God of Israel grant the petition you have made to him. The story concludes that Hannah went home, was in a better mood. Before long, pregnant with a male child who would become one of the most important figures in the Old Testament time, the great prophet Samuel. But for this morning, leave all the other possible teachings for this lesson behind and look at this one very important teaching. The lesson is this: things do change. Nothing is permanent. Everything is in a state of constant flux. Hannah had been without child and was the butt of jokes and ridicule. But that changed, and she became known as the woman who gave birth to the greatest leader of his day. Have you seen any episodes of the television series Life Without People? It's a fascinating look at what would happen to the world if what we know as people were somehow taken away. If humanity were no longer part of the picture, how would the picture look? Frankly, this program was probably conceived by a Buddhist monk. It's a classic and startling look at the nature of impermanence. In one episode, the city of Washington, D.C. is considered in a world after people. Without people, the electrical grid would fail, and the pumps that keep the land on which Washington is built from returning to the swamp it used to be would fail. And in less than 100 years, our nation's capital would look like marble islands floating on a sea.